Cheryl Morales, president of the Garifuna American Heritage Foundation United, gets an invitation to do 3 lectures in the month of November at El Camino College.
Today, and we're all excited. We also have a new special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Andy Gorbetian. I am a PhD student, and I work with Garifuna populations in Nicaragua and Honduras as well. And so I'm here to learn along with you all in this presentation.
Where are you working on your dissertation? Which university?
Oh, at University of New Mexico.
Albuquerque?
Albuquerque.
Awesome. The Garifuna American Heritage Foundation United. The mission is to serve the Garifuna American, Caribbean American, and Central American community in the greater LA and Long Beach areas, United States and abroad through cultural educational programs, outreach, advocacy, and social services programs to empower and educate the people about the rich history and values of Garifuna culture by preserving and disseminating its culture in order to reacculturate the new generations of Garifuna Americans, to create innovative educational programs that motivate, expand knowledge, promote its culture in general, enhance Garifuna awareness for opportunities, and foster Garifuna identity. Garifuna believes that having an appreciation of one's own culture sets the stage for developing partnerships with people who come from culturally diverse backgrounds. What a word considering today's political climate. Let me say that last sentence again. The Garifuna believe that having an appreciation of one's own culture sets the stage for developing partnerships with people around the globe who come from culturally diverse backgrounds. I love that.
Witi Panafi, Cheryl Morales Niripe, Garifuna Nagia, Pantantingo. Good morning. My name is Cheryl Morales. I am Garifuna, and I am very proud to be here. Thank you for having me here, Dr. Humphrey, for always having us here. So today I'm going to share with you about my Garifuna culture. Just a few words that I'm going to kind of have you take a note of is Urame, St. Vincent. That's our native word for our homeland, Urame. You will hear me speak that word often because it's very special to me. That's where my ancestors come from. And also you will hear interchangeably, because I'm sure you've already gone through a little bit of Garifuna history where you hear us being referred to as black Caribs, yellow Caribs, and so on. So our name for ourselves, our indigenous name for ourselves is Kalina. And also you will hear often saying between Kalina and Arawak. The reason we say that is because Garifuna people are mixed with two indigenous groups, the Kalina, who are referred to as the Caribs, and then the Arawaks, and then also the African heritage that we also have. So when you hear me going back and forth, I'm basically talking about the same people, just our indigenous name for ourselves and the name that the colonizers gave us. Urame St. Vincent is the name of the Kalina Garifuna people's homeland in our native language, St. Vincent. St. Vincent has been inhabited for more than 7,000 years, first by the Siboneyes, the Lokono, who are later known as Arawaks, Kalina group, who are known as Carib. The Kalina would often form unions with the Lokono tribe, who later inhabited the neighboring Dominica. So the territories for our Garifuna people in Urame is in the Lesser Antilles, with a group of 24 small land islands. The Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean meet, that's where we're at. The clinical Carib territory stretched over 500 miles from Grenada, Tobago, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Antigua, and St. Vincent, now St. Kitts. Trinidad and Barbados are Arawak territories. In the history books, according to the oral historians, and also in the Library of Timbuktu, which I didn't add to that, there is a story that tells about Prince Abubakar, who abdicated his throne in 1311 to explore the Atlantic Ocean. There are two currents that originate from Africa, and when they come, they land in the west, flow west and land in America. The Mandinka people of the Mali Empire made voyages to America. The first voyages was in 1310. They left with 200 ships, 100 ships with men and 100 ships of supply. That was the first voyage. Out of those 200 ships, only one ship returned, and they were able to tell them that they found land. So the next trip was in 1311, and in 1311 they left with 1,000 ships of supplies and 1,000 ships of men, and they just made their way around the Caribbean. They bought again 200 ships of material the initial trip. The second trip they bought again 1,000 ships of men and 1,000 ships of supply. According to Taino historian Huacan Vidal, to conquer and divide the tribes, the Europeans fabricated the story that the Kalina men would slaughter the Lagono men and kidnap the women to make them their wives. Unfortunately, this is not, what happened. This is a disparaging remark, a disparaging story that's been told over and over and over throughout history. I'm sure you read that also in the history books. Around 1310, African American explorers arrived and mated with the Kalinico women. The Malayan African admixture with the Amerindians gave birth to us, the Garifuna people. The European once again created a false narrative that the African explorers were savages who brutally killed the Kalinico men and took the women as their wives. Unfortunately, this story continues today. The picture that you see there is of Mansa Musa. He's the one who inherited the throne after Abu Bakr abdicated his throne again in 1311. The ancient oral history of Garifuna people, our history says that he is our descendant. That's where we came from. I know you probably hear Garifuna people come from shipwrecks, slave wrecks, whichever one they say, in 1635 and 1668 and 16. That never happened. The one thing about the Europeans is they maintain accurate records. They archived a lot of the stuff, so they were not able to find, over all these years, they've never been able to find any records of a shipwreck that occurred around that time or in that area. So this is our life before the occupation. Prior to the occupation by the British and French planters, here they called colonizers in the United States, they call them colonizers. In the Caribbean, we call them planters. So for us, the planters are those who tried to steal our land. Again, prior to the occupation by the British, the French planters, the island's indigenous people lived in relative peace. The Garifuna people were seafaring people who relied on fishing and farming. Part of our gastronomy is ground food. As you can see in this picture here, our food really doesn't look like anything familiar that you guys probably have eaten before. So we eat a lot of ground food, which is basically a lot of potatoes, a lot of cassava. Cassava is our main staple. If you look here, it's our cassava bread. That's our main staple. When you see here, this is our cassava bread. That's our main staple. We eat that every day. This is cassava sweet bread. It's like a cake. It's really sweet as dulce. Then we have a cassava tamale. This is also sweet. And over here we have bundiga, which is made out of grated green banana. We grate it and then we boil it in coconut milk. That is another thing that we're always using coconut milk for everything. This is another favorite dish of Garifuna. It's boiled in coconut milk, of course with fried fish, and then we smash the bananas, the plantain, the green and ripe plantain together, and then we mix that. And this is empanadas, which is basically, this is fish wrapped in masa, fried, and this is how we eat it. Again, our food, it doesn't look like anything that you've ever seen before. So that's our gastronomy. Again, seafaring people, we rarely ate meat. Majority of our diet consisted of seafood, even today. One of our mating rituals was we had to meet each other's parents to just establish our kinship, our bloodline, to make sure we were not closely related. Typically, any Garifuna was able to marry another Garifuna from a surrounding village. That was at least their third cousin removed. Anything after that, you couldn't get married to because it was too close in blood. So once the families met to determine that we were able to, marry, they would present a dowry. And this dowry was presented until, according to the ancestors, until probably around my grandmother's age. My grandmother received the dowry. After that, we stopped that practice throughout the Garifuna community. One of the things that we did before the occupation is we have our own way of just childbearing. We have our own way of taking care of our children. One of the things that we do is that we would mold our child's head. We would put a little bit of plywood there, tie it down, and we would also wear red. Red in our indigenous way are protective. They're very protective. So whenever we wear red, it's to protect the baby from a lot of things. And one of the things that they did was they would tie the feet. Now for the females, they would tie their feet in order for their feet to remain little like their indigenous mothers. But however, for the African American side of the boy babies, they wanted to make sure that their feet were broad like their father. And also with the girls, they would rub their nose, so they would shape their nose to look like their mothers. But for the boys, they wanted to maintain their African American features, their African features, so they did not rub the boys' nose. This one is very important to me, spiritual belief. Spiritual belief is part of who we are as indigenous people. Prior to the encounter and Christianity and the various religions, Garifuna people today still believe in their ancestors. We worship our ancestors. They're the ones that we pray to. They're the ones that we ask for guidance. They're the ones that we seek when we need any kind of help, guidance. So the Garifuna people have their own spirituality and practices. They worship and believe in the ancestors along with other deities. Even now, the Garifuna people maintain their traditional spirituality and rituals, including symbolically feeding the dead, bathing the dead, and providing whatever the ancestors request. Typically, our ancestors will come to us in our dreams and they will say what they want. And whatever it is that they want, they, then the provider, the family, whoever had the dream will provide that for them. If they're hungry, they tell us what they want to eat, and we prepare their food and we set it down for them. Now, when it comes to that, the belief is we have a sacred covenant with them. They take care of us in this life, and long as we remember, we take care of them in the afterlife. And how do we take care of them in the afterlife? It's by doing those symbolic ceremonies that I just mentioned. And in Garifuna, it's called Abunlu Amurnu. I for you, you for me. So that's a very sacred touch that we have. And one of the things that we do when we're doing the ceremonies for the ancestors is we have two major ceremonies. We have the dugu and we have the shugu. The dugu and the shugu are both spiritual healing for the community. The dugu is a big, grand communal. And then the shugu is usually just an individual family. And the shugu could take place any place. It could take place in somebody's house, but traditionally a dugu has to be taking place in what we call a dubuyaba, which is a Garifuna temple. And the dubuyaba has a lot of nuances that I won't get into today because you need a whole lecture on Garifuna spirituality to describe what takes place in the dubuyaba. Depending on the family member, it will take anywhere between 3 days to up to a week to perform the dugu ceremony. So it's a very lengthy process, but everything is communal. Everybody wake up together at the same time. We eat together, we cook together, everything is communal. And that's intentional so we can renew our communal way of life. And some of the things also, when it comes to Garifuna, we have what we call our heaven. You guys call heaven, we call it Seti. That's our heaven. That's where our ancestors, that's their final resting place. And in our ancient belief, it takes them 9 days to get there. Once they arrive to Seri, then they become Ahadi. Ahadi is what they're called. That's when they become our ancestors. That's when they become our spiritual guides. During that 9 days when they're traveling to Seri, we can't communicate with them. We can't feel their presence, but once they make it to Seti and they become an Ahadi, a spiritual guide, then we're able to communicate with them. Next slide. So our native language. Our native language is an Arawak-based language, indigenous. We are pretty much the only people who speak this language who have maintained the majority of our language. The Caribs in Dominica, they've tried to kind of like get their language back together, and they've often come to us Garifuna people because we're the only ones who actually have our language intact. So a lot of the Tainos, because it's the same language. If you know the Tainos are in Puerto Rico, we're pretty much the same people. The Tainos and the Garifuna people are cousins. so our language are similar. And they've lost a lot of their language, just like the Carib people in Dominica, they've lost their language and they look to us to reclaim their language. So the language is a VSOP, verb, subject, object language. These are a few of our alphabets. And over here, again, we have our full array of language workbooks. We have our numbers. We have our days of the week. We have our days of the week, the months, and these are some of the learning tools that we use to try to, educate the young next generation so they learn the language. We do online classes. We used to have in-person classes, but with funding, you lose a lot of, the first thing you lose is cultural funding, so we lost that money. But just a few things, to say A, I'll say it real quick. Garunati, ba, sha, da, gayumati, ba, ga, ha, gagriti, ka, la, ma, na, nya, garati, pa, ra, sa, ta, maguti, gagriti, wa. Yeah. So that's our alphabet. And if you look real closely, you'll see they don't have all the letters that we have, but it's unique. The Garifuna language is absolutely a unique indigenous language to learn. And some people say it's easy, especially if you have some knowledge of Spanish and French. It's a little bit easy because in some of the words we inherited from the Spanish people when we migrated to Central America, and then some words we also inherited when we were living with the French. The Europeans began to arrive in Uruguay and other islands in 1498. The British planters, followed by the French, later established settlements in Uruguay and started to displace the Kaliniku. The planters claimed that the occupied territories surveyed on the lands, belonged to them. They got the good lands and they just kept inching us away. The increased presence of the Europeans and their illegal land grabbing will lead to 150 years of fighting. We fought for our land for 150 years. It was never about slavery, because again, Garifuna people were never enslaved. When the Europeans came to our land, to our homeland, we welcomed them, and what they did was they stole our land in a nutshell. And we fought them because it was our motherland. It was our birthright. Again, the increased presence of the Europeans and their illegal land grabbing would lead to 150 years of battle, to two major wars with the Camino. So we had two major wars. We had a lot of little skirmishes, little fights in between, but the two major wars was first the Carib War, the first Carib War, and the second Carib War. By the 1700s, the British became irritated with fighting us. It's just like, how long is this fighting going to continue? It's been 150 years already. When will we get tired? You never get tired of fighting for your homeland. Any of us who own homes, have properties, parents have land and property in their native country, those are ancestral land, and we're going to continue to fight with them, blood, sweat, and everything else. So, the many treaties signed were violated by the British, including the peace treaty, March 31st, 1660. Now, this is the peace treaty that recognized that St. Vincent and Dominica were Carib territory that were not supposed to either belong to the English or the French. But of course, you know what happened with that treaty. They violated it. They violated the treaty, and once again, we had to fight them. So this is the last major war that we had, which led to us Garifuna people being exiled from our homeland. But one of the things that you have to think about during this time is that prior to the whole land grabbing stuff, the Garifuna people, again, I mentioned it earlier, were never, ever, ever described as black Caribs, yellow Caribs, or whatever. That happened around this time in order to justify stealing our land. Once you lose your indigenous land rights, you have no way of claiming your homeland. And that's important. I'm going to continue to say that because it happens also in our adopted country of Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize. Our indigenous land rights is the number one thing that we have to fight for in our land, in those countries. So this is our original Garifuna territory. if you look at it, it's pretty much all of St. Vincent and their surrounding islands. Next slide. The wars. By the 1700s, again, the British had become increasingly irritated fighting with the Clinton group. The many treaties signed, violated by, the colonizers, not us. And according to archives, the British intentionally went from calling the Caribs of St. Vincent to referring to them as Black Caribs around 1760s. At a council dated May 10, 1769, the attendees discussed drafting a militia bill against the Black Caribs. In Julia James' new writing, The Caribs of St. Vincent, it says that basically this was their justification for taking our land by putting a color label on us instead of referring to us as the original people of St. Vincent. The first Carib War from 1772 through 1773, and the second Carib War from 1795 to 1797. So, again, I will emphasize, everything is about the land. Everything was to garner the fertile land it was very fertile in St. Vincent. We had a lot of volcanic soil, so we grew a lot of good crops, and one of the main industries in St. Vincent was the sugar plant. And these are the metals. This metal over here is the metals that they gave their Europeans every time they killed one of us, every time they killed a Garifuna person. This metal was given to British soldiers who occupied and killed Carib warriors. According to the archives, the British intentionally again went from calling us Caribs to calling us Black to justify the slaughter that they inflicted upon white people. The Garifuna paramount chief Joseph Chartier, was killed during the Second Carib War on March 14, 1795. After his death, his brother Chief Duvalier led his battle for 1 year after his death. Now, Chief Joseph Chartier is an interesting character. He is the equivalent of Martin Luther King here. He was the peacemaker. He believed what the colonizers said, oh, we're gonna have peace, let's go ahead. So he really wanted to believe this. But every time they violated the treaty, it just got worse and worse and worse. Now, his brother Duvalier was more like Malcolm X, by any means necessary. While during the wars, Chief Chartier would try to preserve the land. He tried not to kill people if he didn't have to. But Duvalier was a different story. He was all about slash and burn. I will kill anybody I find and I will burn down any structure because this is our land. He was a little bit more warrior. He did what he did. So these coins here, these medallions here are interesting because what they did was because they did not know the landscape of the St. Vincent, they enlisted the help of their slaves, of the African American people, to help capture us. So these were particularly the medals that they gave those people who assisted. It's emotional for me because it's like it was a lot that people who we once upon a time from these various islands, when they needed refuge from their colonizers, from their occupiers, we helped them. And then they turned around and they had no problem helping these same people who kept them enslaved. They had no remorse in helping them capture us and kill us, and they were rewarded for it with a medal. The whole conquer and divide type thing. We helped them, but unfortunately they turned around and they killed us. They were part of the problem, not the solution. Next slide. So, if you notice on this slide over here, that's the cannon that's pointed towards the Garifuna village. Mind you, when you go here at Doshire Hill, you have the water over here. And most people, when you're at a fort and you're protecting your fort and you're protecting your land, you point the cannon outwards towards invasion, towards the ocean of people coming your way. However, there in Doshire Hill, it's pointed towards the people. It's pointed towards the indigenous people. Even today, when you go to the museum there, it's back, pointed downwards towards the Garifuna villages. It was not until 1797 when the British Empire, along with the enforcement support from American warship, So that's part of American history that most people don't know, that during this time, we sent warships because it was going to take 30 days for them to get a warship from England. So they were able to get a warship from the United States to go over there to help defeat the Garifuna people. Again, with the support of American warships called the Zebra and the Rosebud, were the Garifuna people finally defeated. That's when we were defeated because of the help of Americans. The Garifuna people were charged with treason against the British crown, and we were essentially sentenced to death. Between October 1796 and March 1797, an estimated 4,338 to 5,200 now were labeled Black Caribs were captured and imprisoned on this very island. Now the number is never quite known. We estimate that it was more, but this is what's documented. But even they said they know that it was actually more of us that were killed. So again, according to records, around 2,400 Black Caribs died of rare diseases, including yellow fever on Belize. Garifuna historians narrate that Garifuna people were poisoned with arsenic in Belize and aborted transport ships. The British had no intention of exiling the Garifuna people or having them live. Basically, again, we were charged with treason, and the sentence for treason against the British crown back then was death. So they had no intention of us making it. The Garifuna people first arrived to Port Royal, Honduras on April 12, 1797. After we were imprisoned on the island for 18 months, we were later transported on 11 vessels and sent to off Roatan. Now, when we were there in Roatan, we lived as a group of people for 30 years. We stayed there. So every Garifuna person started off in Roatan. We lived there again amongst ourselves for over 30 years. Then around 1802, Garifuna people made their way to Guatemala. Then they later made their way to Belize. But as early as 1799, there's reports of Garifuna people being in parts of Belize. But their official count is, like they like to say 1802, 1804, but Guatemala made it to, Garifuna people made it to Guatemala in 1802. And then later on, they made their way to Nicaragua and so forth. Now, one of the things that happened was there was a Garifuna person, an unidentified Garifuna man, and they asked, and he was asked about the resettlement in Central America. And I like to say, this is the essence of who Garifuna people are. As the Carib leader proclaimed, I do not command in the name of anyone. I am not English, I am not French, nor am I Spanish, nor do I care to be any of these things. I am Carib. I am a Carib subordinate to no one. I do not care to be more or to have more than what I have. That is the essence of Garifuna people. Garifuna people, again, for years have fought for their identity, their language, their land. We are who we are. Even after being exiled for now 228 years away from our homeland. That's the reason. Why did we fight for 150 years? Because once your homeland is stolen from you, you will never get it back. You will never, ever get it back. Maybe you'll have a reservation here or there, which we do have 8 reservations in St. Vincent, but we will never get our homeland back. Just like the Native Americans here, they have reservations here and there, but they will never get their homeland back. And that's the thing about why did we fight so hard for our land? Because it was our ancestral land. So tomorrow is November 19th. And the celebration for November 19th is the settlement of the Garifuna people in Belize, which was led by Alejo Benny in 1832. That is the celebration that they celebrate in Belize and also in Nicaragua. They celebrate November Blessing. They celebrate November 19th as their resettlement day. In April, we celebrate our settlement day in Honduras as the Garifuna Pole, because that's when we all arrived to Central America. Next slide. So the lineage of Joseph Chartier, again, he was by pretty much 4 days into the last Carib War. But again, he is the one that is always spoke about, because again, he was the more of the Martin Luther King person. So they always highlight the person who was more of an appeaser than the person who was a fighter. And Chartier is the one who they honored the most, even though, again, he died within the first 4 days of the battle, of the last Carib War. If anything, his brother Duvalier was the one who led his people and fought for us to have a somewhat safe surrender, even though that was also violated. So after Chartier's death on March 14, 1795, his brother Duvalier and his people battled for another year. According to oral records, amongst those who made it to Roatan was Chartier's brother, his son, and his daughter, Felicia. The oral tradition left by Chartier's daughter, Felicia, to her descendants, these are the 6 original tribes of the Garifuna people. And they're still in Honduras. They still are aware of who they are and which lineage they belong to. Now, Dr. Humphrey and I always talk about this is supposed to be American history. It's not African American history or anything else. This is American history. The first playwright in New York, which took place in, I don't have it, yeah, sorry, in 1821, was written by, Mr. Henry Brown. And that play was about us, about Garifuna people. The historians believe because the play depicted was so accurate with the information of what happened in St. Vincent that some historians believe that he was actually from St. Vincent. They don't know if he was Creole, if he was Garifuna, but his vital account of what happened in St. Vincent during those last wars, they believe that he must have had first-hand knowledge. He must have seen that, and that's where he based his play from. But what happened to this play that nobody ever heard of? On the day of the opening, after months of rehearsal, the day that this play was supposed to open in New York, they burned it down. They burned down the playhouse. They burned down the playhouse because they did not want this information of a place on the American continent where Garifuna people were people that were free, that were never enslaved, that they had this history of actually fighting their oppressors for 150 years. That was not good for what was going on in the United States at that time. They did not want that. During this time, you have to think about what was happening in the United States. We have the uprising of Nate Turner. We have everything that was happening in Haiti. So they did not want the enslaved black people here to be influenced by anything that was happening worldwide. That's why that theater was done. And you sitting here being an American citizen do not know this history about the first play that was written about Chief Joseph Chartier, my chief. The first migration of the Garifuna people to the United States has been documented since the early 1950s. According to oral history, many Garifuna people from throughout Central American countries worked for the then United Fruit Company. That was the Chiquita Banana Fruit Company, if you guys remember Chiquita Banana. So this was the fruit company that pretty much everybody from the Central America area, the Caribbean, from Jamaica, from Cayman, they would come to Guatemala to work for this company. A lot of them that were in pension service, they would come make their way over there to work for the United Fruit Company. So these well-paid laborers, of course, when the United Fruit Company brought their products, they always landed in New Orleans at the time. So a lot of Garifuna people, their first settlement was in New Orleans. If you think about what happened in Katrina, that lower ward was predominantly Garifuna people. Back then, New Orleans was like the 3rd largest Garifuna population here in the United States.
Say it one more time. You said in Katrina.
Yeah.
Katrina, the lower ward was Garifuna.
Majority Garifuna people. So after Katrina, those Garifuna people that lived in the lower wards relocated to Houston. So now in Houston, they have the 3rd largest Garifuna population now in Houston. So here in the United States, we have New York has the largest population of Garifuna people outside of Central America. They have an estimated almost 200,000 Garifuna people. Los Angeles has the second largest population of Garifuna people. We have at least about 100,000 estimated here. And then in Houston, that's the third largest Garifuna population because of that influx of Garifuna people who relocated after Katrina. And our Garifuna communities in Central America are Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, Nicaragua. And in St. Vincent, they're just now starting to appreciate the Garifuna history. And they're just now, barely now, starting to identify as Garifuna people. Because when they left, the history that was left behind about the Garifuna people was that we no longer exist. So for many years, it wasn't until maybe the early 2000s that the people in St. Vincent finally were able to reconnect with the Garifuna people and learn that no, we're still here. We're still here. Because according to what was said in St. Vincent, that us Garifuna people that were exiled all died. That was what was written even in Europe for a very long time. I remember the first time I got a call from a student from Germany for her doctorate, and she was like, I'm doing a research on Garifuna here in Germany. Because I said, in Germany? It's like, yeah, they teach about you in Germany. Woo! But they said you guys all died. And I was like, well, I'm still here. Like, seriously? Garifuna people are still alive? So I was able to connect her with the Garifuna community in New York, and she was able to build her research, but she could not believe that we were still alive. So one of the things that's lacking and that's important here is Garifuna Dwell. Garifuna Dwell for Garifuna people is our way of life, it's our identity, it's just basically everything of who we are. While it's okay here in the United States to, use the labels that are associated to people that look like me. Oh, you're from Central America, you're Afro-Latino. Oh, you're here, you're Black American. But that's not okay for us to use in our countries of origin. Like I said earlier, once we go away from our indigenous roots as Garifuna people, we lose our land rights. In Honduras, you won't hear it here, but for several years, they have been slaughtering Garifuna people for their land. You won't hear that on CNN. You won't hear that anywhere on any local news. But for years, they have been killing Garifuna people for their land rights, for resorts, for cruise ships, for all these things that don't matter to us. But our land is taken, and our people are being brutalized to this day, getting killed, getting kidnapped, getting set on fire for their land. So when we talk about land rights, it started off with land rights. And we're still dealing with our land rights in our country now, in Central America. It's not as bad in Belize, and it's not that bad in Guatemala, but in Honduras. And in parts of Nicaragua, our land rights is something that we will continue to die for, because it's ours. Those are the lands that belong to us as indigenous people. So it's important for us to identify as Garifuna people.
Open for Q&A.
I'll try my best to answer.
Can you go over the countries where the Garifuna are located now?
In Honduras, we have over 54 Garifuna communities throughout Honduras. In Belize, we have over, technically, between 6 to 8, but some people will argue whether Belize City is actually a Garifuna community, but we do have Garifuna people there. So there's certain areas that is like they're considered Garifuna territories, but then other people are like, no, it's not enough Garifuna people to mark it that. But in Belize, we say between 6 and 8. In Nicaragua, I believe there is 4 or 5.
Six
Officially, right? 6 Garifuna communities in Nicaragua. In St. Vincent, there is 7 Garifuna territories, reserves in St. Vincent. We went to visit there in 2019, and we were able to do what we do here, teach the Garifuna people that are there, who remained there, who lost everything, who lost their language, they lost their identity, they lost everything of who they are as Garifuna. Like I said earlier, they're just now starting to identify as Garifuna people. In Guatemala, we have 2 Garifuna villages. Did I name them all?
Communities,
Belize, Guatemala. Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Did I name all of them?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. And then, of course, here in the United States, again, New York being the largest population of Garifuna people, diversified. We have a large Honduran community in New York, followed by Guatemala and Belize. Here, we have the largest Belizean Garifuna community here, followed by Guatemala and Honduras. And then in Houston, the largest population of Garifuna people from Honduras, again, second largest in over there. Again, from the whole Katrina thing, left the ward over there and then went to Houston.
You mentioned that when you were, the people faced political persecution in Europe. Is it also in Honduras, Belize, and all of them?
Yes, yes. The number one thing in all of these countries is they don't want to identify us as indigenous. But then it's also reflected the Mayans. The Mayans had to fight for their land because during the